And a good undefeated Monday morning, Birds fans. You got Mac and Mac here on Birds 365. Yes, let us start with undefeated. Johnny and I are going to, for the next 2 hours and 4 days after that, talking all the way up till a trip to LA for next week. We will nitpick, we will break down, we will point out things that the Eagles did not do well and or should be worried about going forward. But we always have to come back to 4-0 is 4-0, okay? There's only two teams in the NFL that have started that way. It's the Eagles and the Niners, and no one else is undefeated. So remember that. That should be the number one theme all week long. They're undefeated. But there were a couple things that they could have done better yesterday. And yes, we'll emphasize both the positive and the negative. Johnny Mac, when you walked out of Lincoln Financial Field after all your post-game work and being on the JAKIB Media post-game show and everything you had to get done, got in the car to head back over to South Jersey, what was the thing that was foremost in your mind?
Jake Elliott's really good.
That's a good one.
That's number one. Yeah, that guy. I watched him kick a 72-yard field goal in practice this week.
72?
72, yeah. Now, it was with and I explained this to people, it was a tee. He was off by himself. There's no rush. There's no holder. There's no
right.
But he banged one through. That's pretty stinking impressive, Jody. Any way you look at it. So, I mean,
and give me the measurables on Jake.
Well, yeah, Jake's not big. I don't have him in front of me, but
5'11".
I can't imagine he's 5'11", maybe 180. But yeah, packs a lot of power in that little body. Braden Mann's very small too, by the way.
Yeah, he's a little guy, certainly compared to Sippus.
Yeah, certainly 5'9", 167 is Jake Elliott. Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
He's not 170 pounds.
Pretty impressive what kind of power he can generate. To the point, you're kicking a 54-yard. It's around the NFL as a whole too. I mean, these kickers have gotten so good, and so back in the day, that used to be a big deal. Now I'm like, he's walking up there. All right, I'm like game over pretty much, and right down the middle. So that's number one, Jake Elliott. But yeah, I mean, it was sloppy, and the old cliches tend to be cliches for a reason, and one of them is division games tend to be closer than maybe you might expect, and that comes true a lot of the times. And certainly, I think Sam Howell played very well. I think they made the overcorrection after the bad game in Buffalo. So I want to give him credit as well. I think he did a really good job for the most part. Young quarterback, but and then the Eagles made some questionable decisions, and whether it's scoring too soon. Look, if you're playing Patrick Mahomes, I'll listen to the scoring too soon stuff a little bit more when you try to manipulate the game. I think the bigger issue there was AJ getting the penalty for taunting, which gave essentially Washington, I believe, returned it to the 36. So they got 11 more yards than they should have on a typical touchback. And that started things. And then ultimately, ironically, I think the touchdown was 10 yards. So, on the final play of the game. So that was a big impact. You got to tighten up on that kind of stuff. But AJ took responsibility. You can't do that. Taunting, he and Forbes were going back and forth pretty much the whole game. Ole Miss guy versus Mississippi State guy. Maybe that played into it. But can't do that stuff, especially a veteran player. And then, Reed Blankenship in overtime. Washington won the toss. They ran a play, got nothing on first down. Then they ran a nice little crossing pattern. You could see that Eric Bieniemy influence from Kansas City with this team, by the way. A lot of crossing patterns. Looked like it was going to develop, and Reed just shoots in, stops it for a 4 or 5 yard gain, whatever it was. And he got hurt. He got banged up on the play, stayed in. And I don't know. You got a better look. I still got to watch because it's, um, I don't know if McLaurin got in. I don't know if that was a primetime game. You have more camera angles. Marcus Mariota, I know, had his best play of the season, getting his head in the way of the one angle. Good job from Marcus. But boy, it's funny because I always say the same thing with Devontae, with good receivers. Devontae always gets his feet in. I don't know how, but he always gets his toes in. Same thing when McLaurin caught that. I said, "That's Terry McLaurin. I mean, let's watch this again." And whether he landed on Reed's hand or wrist or whatever, the fact that he was there to make it more difficult. If he wasn't there, he was getting in easily.
Probably was, yep.
Throw, nice catch, and who knows what happens from there. So those are my main takeaways. Reed Blankenship in overtime, and obviously Jake. And I know people are going to nitpick about the coaching, but often, boy, man, people get so in the weeds with X's and O's and 3rd and 11, and like they're the first team in the history of the world to run a draw play on 3rd and 11. Nick Sirianni's got this team. I would say managing people is a big part of the job. They're 4-0, as you mentioned. I'm glad you started with that, Jody. There's 32 teams in this league. We're down to 2 that are 4-0. Everybody, who was the flavor of the week last week, coming off 70 points? The Miami Dolphins. Oh, Miami this, Miami. They get blitzed by 4 touchdowns. The first 2 weeks, it was Dallas. And how good is Dallas? And I was in that category. Boy, they look really good. They look really good. And they lose to Arizona. And they overcorrect and they look like themselves the next week. To be able to win these games in this league and just find ways to win games, that's not given enough credit because it is really difficult. And we're up to 21 of 22 when Jalen Hurts is the starting quarterback.
And, oh, by the way, Jalen Hurts in the passing game came back yesterday. For those of you who were panicked for the first 3 weeks, oh, my God, where's the passing? Where's Jalen Hurts? Mr. Runner-Up MVP. Doesn't look like a runner-up MVP to me. He did yesterday. He threw the ball very well in the Eagles passing game. Was a big reason they hung in the game, eventually won the game. On your McLaurin play on the sideline, I still couldn't tell. And I agreed with the announcer. Moose Johnston was on a call yesterday. If they had called it inbounds, I don't know that there was enough to overturn it. Because they called it out of bounds, there wasn't enough definitive evidence to overturn it. It was right. It was a matter of inches. The top of his cleat being on the white or off the white was that close. And you are 100% right. If Reed Blankenship isn't there, I firmly believe McLaurin gets a call, that he gets his feet down because Reed was that close. His hand may have kept him from being able to step inbounds rather than out of bounds. And that, of course, was a very huge play. But it's a good thing that Reed made that play overall because I thought yesterday the Eagles secondary was not good. Now, I know they were shorthanded and they had 2 scratches before the game in Evans and Brown, and they elevated McCollum, who did nothing but play special teams. So the DBs were out there on an island by themselves yesterday. I don't know if they ran out of gas. Washington moved the ball damn well in the first period up and down the field. I thought it was a less than stellar effort from the Eagles' defensive backfield. I thought Darius Slay got abused yesterday. Now, if it was more zone coverage and it wasn't his responsibility, I'm sure Darius will let us know because Darius doesn't like when you point out that he gets beat. And it may very well be the case, but it seemed to me they went into his area of the zone a lot yesterday to take advantage. So it was not a great defensive secondary effort across the board yesterday, Johnny Mac.
No, you're right. And that secondary is a problem with how it's, they got to figure out. And it doesn't have anything to do with Bradbury or even Slay, because I agree with you. And I don't, Slay, a lot of zone coverage, and they were blowing some zones yesterday. But people are going after Josh Jobe. And yesterday they were going after Terrell Edmonds as well. And they should.
Edmonds, I mean, that's what teams. Stupid penalties.
Yeah. And that's what teams should do, and that's what they're doing. And you know, the end of the game in regulation, Sam made a mistake with 5 seconds left. He threw short of the end zone. You almost would have hoped Reed made that play as well. You almost would have let him, hey, catch the football, and the clock's going to run out, and the game's going to be over right there. And then whether Bieniemy got in his headset and said, "Look, this ball's got to go to the end zone," and they said, "All right, where's Job?" And we're going to throw it there. And that's what they did, basically. And they were able to tie the game. By the way, Ron Rivera's got to go for two there.
Ooh.
Got to go for two.
What happened to Riverboat Ron?
Yeah,
That's his
that doesn't
nickname.
exist. That doesn't exist. You got to go for two there. And he was talking after the game, talking about, well, the guys were gassed. It was a long drive. Well, if you're gassed, guess what? The defense is gassed.
Defense. The Eagle defense should be more gassed than your offense. Most of you are drive blocking straight ahead.
Yeah, and not only have the adrenaline rush of time, not time because you're a point behind, but you score, you have a chance to win the game. That's all offensive tilted right there. As far as the long drive. So I don't agree with Ron Rivera. Eagles are the better team, the more talented team. They're playing at home. Everything says go for two right there and try to steal the win. And who knows what happens if they do that. Obviously, the Eagles could stop them, but they were on their heels. That's the way I would have went. And I guarantee you Ron Rivera's rethinking that today, but there's nothing you can do from his standpoint. But yeah, the secondaries, Josh is okay, and he's improving, and I'm sure he'll get better. But they need to figure out that nickel spot, and maybe it's just Sidney Brown. Maybe when he returns, you just put him there because you're affecting two positions. I said it from day one. Remember, Bradbury's fine. He's doing a fine job. I didn't love the matchup with Curtis Samuel because he's very quick, and he caught 7 of 8 targets.
You had
but
no
only,
choice yesterday when you don't even have another
yeah,
option.
yeah, exactly.
He's going to be in the slot.
Yeah.
Bradbury had to play in the slot yesterday. There wasn't a choice.
Yeah, but and that's what I said. He caught most of the passes thrown his way, but only for 51 yards, so he didn't kill you, and he had the jet sweep. But long term, I mean, he's one of the best outside corners in football. It's a more important position. You got to keep him outside. You pay money for those players for a reason. Outside corners get paid more than slot corners for a reason. It doesn't make any sense to me. And whether it's trade market outside the organization or just Sidney Brown, they gotta settle that down.
Let me ask you this, because we talked about it plenty, and you brought it up here on Birds 365. You were surprised when in camp they cross-trained Bradbury at the slot position, which, like you noted, what's going on here? You got one of the best outside corners in the business. Why would you be moving him inside? And I think he's athletic enough to play there. Usually a guy his size, you go, yeah, that's just not a good idea because he's just that big. You need a smaller, quicker guy to play inside. But you can be 6'2" and that quick and be able to play there. And I think Bradbury's damn close to that. But if you're going to do cross training, you're going to be looking at worst case scenario. Oh, by the way, worst case scenario came up and bit you in the rear end. Why didn't they cross train Job there? Is Job completely unable to play in there? I don't know that he's any more of a reach than Bradbury would be. Why didn't they say, well, if we're going to cross-train somebody, let's cross-train a young guy rather than a guy who's already established himself as a Pro Bowl level outside cornerback?
Well, I think it has to do with his abilities as a player. I mean, he can handle it.
Okay.
Whereas, Josh is still trying to learn outside cornerback. It's natural. But the same thing with Eli Ricks and Mekhi Gardner and guys like that. They're trying, they're young players trying to learn their main position. And you see with Sidney Brown and, maybe, from Sidney's standpoint, he played more near the line of scrimmage than backs in too high. So maybe he's a little bit more comfortable, even though he technically wasn't playing slot. He's a little bit more comfortable near the line of scrimmage than he actually is. He barely ever played, single high or cover two or type of that in college. So he's a little bit different in the fact that he's got a comfort level. But yeah, I mean, Josh is trying to learn outside corner, and then you're going to throw that on his plate. You might have to at some point. Because if you start getting, and they've already been through now Mike Evans and Terry McLaurin, but this is every week in the NFL.
Right.
And
this week it'll be, and nobody knows his name yet,
Yeah.
but we'll learn it real fast.
Yeah.
Puka Nacua, who is in the top 5 in the NFL in yards receiving,
Yeah.
and it's for over 500 yards in his first 4 games in the NFL. So yeah, they got somebody that they got to worry about coming up this Sunday.
Yeah. And Matthew, I saw Matthew Stafford got banged up, so that might help the Eagles. But yeah, if Matthew's healthy, he could sling it. And he's smart, and he's played forever, and he's going to attack who he needs to attack. So this might be, depending on his health, this might be a bigger test than maybe it looked on the schedule to begin the season. But yeah, they're going to keep getting tested until they figure that out. And people are going last play of the game, regulation, not last play of the game, last play of regulation. I mean, they just found Job and went after him, and they were going to throw it. And, if he made a play, but they did it on purpose.
Give credit to Sam Howell. That was a pretty nice throw.
It was.
He slammed it into a very tight window. It wasn't like Job was blatantly off in coverage. He was pretty close. That was just a really nice play.
And there were like 3 defenders in the air. It was a great throw. I'm not trying to say that, but it was evident that they were trying to identify where to throw the football. And that's going to continue until, he proves that he can hold up to a certain level. And, this is all nitpicking because as you started the show, 4-0.
4-0.
I mean, 4-0.
I got one more nitpick I want to get into. It's more than a nitpick. It was pretty bad yesterday. Before we get Jeff Carr up here, our first guest. I thought the secondary played poorly yesterday. But you know what? I think the secondary played better than the defensive line. Because expectations are expectations. And when you're down as many guys as the Eagles were in the secondary going into the game, you're playing backups. You're playing guys who haven't had enough experience in the league. The Eagles' defensive line is supposed to be their best unit. Who was it from the NFL Network who said that the Eagles' defensive line was the best unit in all of football? Not just the Eagles.
Yeah, Bucky Brooks. Yeah.
Bucky Brooks. The Eagles' defensive line. And for the first 3 games of the season, he was looking very much right. Where'd they go yesterday, Johnny Mac? They got pushed around by a mediocre offensive line of the Washington Commanders. And I know Hassan Reddick got his first sack, which is nice. Glad he got the cast off. He did nothing. Brandon Graham did nothing. Derek Barnett his agent wants to be able to check out what's out. Please find out what's out there on the trade market for Derek Barnett. How about 3 cans of Bud? I would do that tomorrow for Derek Barnett. Somehow he made 18 appearances. I didn't see him on my screen at all yesterday. The big dogs from the middle, from Georgia, who had been stone cold dominant the first 3 games of the season, didn't do a whole hell of a lot yesterday. Where'd the Eagles defensive line go yesterday, John?
Well, I don't think it was splashy, but I do think, they're still impacting the game. I know,
all those pressures slowed Sam Howell down to
I mean,
game in his NFL career.
To quote JG, everyone's favorite, rush and cover and rush. So we're just talking about the secondary. I thought they impacted on certain. It wasn't as dominant. I mean, 107 yards rushing, which to expect them to be under 50 every week wasn't going to happen. The yards per rush were still under 4. So to me, that's effective. The there were a couple plays like Jalen Carter doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but a couple plays he hurried and got things out of there. Reddick looked better without the cast. Josh Sweat looked good. I think Fletcher played a good game, but it wasn't spectacular. So I get everybody. You mentioned expectations. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Everybody expects them to be the steel curtain or the purple people eaters every week. That's not realistic. And I said coming into the game, I said it on this show, I said it on Football 24/7. That's what happens in this league. Teams overcorrect. And I thought Washington was going to come in with a good plan to at least, try to help that offensive line as much as possible, get the football out of Sam Howell's hand. But I was impressed by Sam Howell. I think he played well. I don't think, and he was sacked 5 times. Now, Nicholas Morrow had 3 of them. He had 4 career
and he didn't
sacks.
play on the defensive line.
No, but, he's not getting sacks by himself. Nicholas Morrow isn't Lawrence Taylor. All right, he's getting sacks because people are worried about Jalen Carter. And one was, I got to look at all 3. The one was a late blitz where the I think it was Carter, impacted the play. And he came around, looped around, and got the sack. So, I mean, they're impacting guys like that. He came in. Look, Nick Morrow's playing great. I think he's one of the underrated stories considering what happened. But he had 4 career sacks, and I think it was 3,600 snaps. He has 3 in one game. Again, he didn't turn into Lawrence Taylor. He's getting 3 sacks because of that defensive front.
Understood. But again, he's Nicholas Morrow, and these other guys expectations are higher. I thought they played poorly yesterday, the defensive line. The linebackers played great. Guys who we don't expect. Cunningham had 13 tackles, somewhere thereabouts. Now, too many of them too far downfield that when they did run the ball and he had to make a tackle down the field, rather than 2 yards, it was 5 or 6 yards down the field. Yards per carry of the Washington running back, same as the Eagles.
Well,
for the same amount of yards.
If
they outrushed the Eagles, that doesn't. I'm not putting that down as a win for the Eagles defense.
Well, the Washington. I mean, Chase Young gave Jordan Mailata fits. Cam Jurgens got hurt. That Washington front is legit. And yeah, same thing. If you expect DeAndre Swift to end the season with 6.8 yards per carry, guess what? That ain't happening. And he was down to 4, and he still had some nice little runs against probably the best defensive front the Eagles are going to see all season. So, yeah, I mean, I thought the interior played well on the Eagles defensive line. And I think the edge guys Reddick was a little bit better. Although, look, I don't think Reddick was playing poorly. He just wasn't finishing. Sweat had trouble in Tampa against Tristan Wirfs, but it's Tristan Wirfs. Every other game he's played well. Yeah, so I don't think they were as bad as I'm more concerned about the secondary. Let's put it that way.
I thought they both, other than the linebackers came up big for the Eagles.
Yeah,
yesterday.
I'm not
I
as
don't
confident.
Think they were good on the front end or the back
as
end.
you are. I'm definitely not as confident in the linebackers as you are. Yeah,
they kind of saved the day yesterday for the Eagles because the rest of the defense for me was not very good. All right, Jeff Kerr, been waiting patiently. We waited for him. Now he waits for us. Let him join the party. Jeff Kerr from CBSSports.com up with us next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game